Hey,
Hey,
Anthony,
Chris.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Just having some Wi-Fi issues earlier.
No worries. At least I'm not having Wi-Fi issues.
Yeah, that's a relief.
But yeah, we're gonna get started in a few minutes. And also, for anybody who's not presenting, if you're not actively asking a question, I would say just please make sure to mute your microphones so that we don't.
And Anthony and Chris, just let you know, the live stream is now up on the Hyperledger channel, YouTube channel. I dropped a link to the live stream page in the chat here, and you probably already know this, but there is also a chat on that live stream page. So when we get to the Q&A, you might want to just keep an eye on both to see if people have questions over there.
Okay.
Thanks, David. I'm
Sure.
monitoring for both
Great.
here.
Nice. And Chris, I set you as co-host, so you have the ability to mute as needed or do anything on Zoom.
Okay,
that we need.
perfect. So is then there a need to record this Zoom one then?
No, I mean, only as a backup. Excuse me. The live stream is automatically recorded on YouTube, so and that works really well. So as soon as you're done here, it should be live on YouTube.
Excellent. Thank you. So I guess we'll give it a couple more minutes, wait for a couple people to join, and then I will hand it off to you, Anthony.
Sounds good to me. Giving away my slides already. All right, just gonna give it maybe like one more minute. We get
Okay.
started at 12:04, 12:05-ish.
All right, I think we can get started for the time being,
Yeah.
and we'll let people join in. But thank you everyone for joining this version of the New York City meetup. Today we're pleased to have Anthony Lusardi from Digital Asset present on why DAML, and just talk more about the programming language and how they've been able to develop certain applications using DAML and Hyperledger. And again, please feel free to ask any questions here in the chat as well as on the YouTube live stream, and we'll try to get them answered as quickly as possible. And I'll hand it off to you, Anthony. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Chris, for the introduction. First, of course, thank you, Chris, David, and everybody at Hyperledger for helping put this together and for giving me, a platform to talk a little bit about DAML. I'm really happy to see, not only in this, but in other ways that we're starting to, work together and communicate more. So I think that's great. And overall, we all win. So yeah, first and foremost, to introduce myself a bit, I'm Anthony Lusardi. I'm a developer advocate at Digital Asset. I've been involved in the public-ish blockchain space for a very long time, and more recently, as of about a year ago, joined Digital Asset and started exploring the private space a bit more. I think that distributed ledgers and blockchains in the private realm are actually quite interesting and do different things that we don't always see in the public realm. And in that ways, they're a lot more like very interesting, very new types of databases is how I like to think about them. And I think that they can be very powerful and, enable very new types of workflows. So today I kind of want to talk a bit about DAML, but before I get to that, I also want to mention that we do have a couple of giveaways today. So we are giving away shirts. Actually, let me see if I have a link here as I accidentally advanced my slides. We are giving away 5 shirts basically to the first 5 people to ask a question about DAML. So if you have any questions during this, definitely don't feel shy in general, but also know that you can get a cool t-shirt. And, we have some very non-corporate branded ones as well, which I actually happen to be wearing this one today. And then beyond that, at the end of this presentation, I will also have another giveaway. We have kind of a certification program at Digital Asset. And so the first 10 people to use that link would be able to actually join and try out the certification. I don't know why I can't. But anyway, enough accidentally advancing my slides. And so basically, the first question, is, I'm sorry if everybody could just mute yourselves. So the first question you might have, is like, why DAML? Don't we already have all the programming languages we need? And you've probably seen this slide already because I accidentally went to it, but we don't. What we actually end up with both in the blockchain distributed ledger space and just in general is we get a lot of languages that do the same thing in different ways. So we basically have the overwhelming majority of every single language we use is imperative and declarative and class-based. And that's largely what we do nowadays. And then we come down to the blockchain space itself, we end up with these same types of languages that behave a lot like their contemporaries, but they have wildly different concerns. When you're programming in most general purpose languages, you end up kind of you end up having to, you essentially have full control when you're programming in a general purpose language, and you have full control of your application state. And even if you go and replicate your state to 10 different locations across the world, across AWS or wherever you want to deploy, you still end up in a situation where as the developer or as the operations are in complete control of the state. And it's just simply not that way with distributed ledgers. So there's a lot of choices you have to make about how you view the world and how you program that just are not well represented with the current, programming paradigms that we have. And just quickly, there's a question from Kenneth Luster asking basically, is there a protocol team such as BIP or EIP within DAML? No, there is not. We actually don't have any BIPs, or I don't know how I would pronounce EIPs out there. Basically, when we actually do have DAML on Besu though, and what we do there is we basically commit data to the chain. You'll actually see kind of how we structure DAML in a little bit, and kind of how the DAML driver / runtime works, such that it makes it a very portable language. But yeah, to answer the question briefly, we actually don't have any BIPs because we don't actually execute directly on blockchains. We execute adjacently and then use them for data storage, persistence, and consensus reasons. So really, like, that's kind of giving it a bit away, and that DAML differs in what it does. And really what DAML does and does best is it becomes a portable language and really a whole tech stack for distributed ledgers. And that this basically, lets us construct ledgers or design distributed applications in such a way that we don't have to worry about tying it so much to our infrastructure when we first begin the design phase of our application. And when we encounter infrastructures that might make more sense to us, the friction in changing them or choosing the right ones is greatly reduced. And there's other things we're working on too beyond that, because DAML is not just a programming language, but a tech stack on top of that that enables better working with these distributed ledgers. So basically, just as a warning, after this slide, we start to get a bit more technical. I'll talk a bit more about the language itself. I probably won't dive into it like I would to the degree in some of the other talks I've given, and then we're going to actually do some live deployment. But going back to the language, when we're starting to talk about it, there's a lot of features and things that we get out of it. So with DAML, it's a Haskell-based language, so we end up with a very concise language that is very, very well suited to quickly prototyping a bunch of different use cases. And in that, you only focus on your business logic. When I show the code, I'll actually kind of explain what that means. But basically, you give DAML a schema of the types of data you want to represent and the transformations you want to make on it. And then DAML can figure out how to handle all that on the back end. There's no real worrying about your database when it comes to DAML. The DAML runtime does it, and I'll explain DAML runtime very shortly, but it also produces, a much more efficient workflow because in DAML, everything is very explicit. So we actually get some very nice security and privacy implications from that. And that's all without writing additional code. And I see we have another question here from Saul. Is DAML compatible with centralized ledgers / databases as shown? Can it begin with a centralized implementation, extend into a distributed ledger implementation? Yeah, that's a great question. It absolutely can. So DAML is very good for deploying to centralized and distributed ledgers and databases. So you can start with a very centralized one. We have a sandbox where you can just have your own dev environment. Then we also have Postgres, SQL implementation, and potentially other implementations in that realm coming out as well. And there you can just have a very traditionally managed database like you would with any other application. You just get some of these nice language features out of it. And then beyond that, when you want to move to the more distributed options, we have Fabric, we have Sawtooth, we have Besu, and a bunch of other options that allow for these much more distributed architectures. And when you write your program once to say work in your sandbox or work on SQL, and then it'll also work on Fabric, it'll work on Sawtooth, and so on. So really, you write your program once, and then the infrastructure considerations that you make all come after that. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Saul. And kind of going back to what I was saying about security and privacy, DAML is written for purpose for multi-party systems where a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different users might have different interests in the ledger itself. So there's really no global state in DAML. There could be if you were just deploying it to SQL and managing it from a single participant node. But really, in the larger scheme of things, the idea is that you and those you're interacting with see the parts of the ledger you're supposed to and don't see the parts you're not supposed to. And I'll kind of show that a little bit in the slide where I show off a little bit of the DAML code. Also, all this makes DAML very portable, and you'll actually see in the live demonstration kind of how that is, how the DAML runtime, or what we call the DAML drivers, make an environment where you only have to write your code once. And also we're working on making DAML much more interoperable. So we're working on a project also adjacent to this, and this presentation is about it, but it's called Canton. And it's designed for allowing DAML apps to talk to each other, even if one of your nodes is on Fabric and the other one's on Sawtooth and the other one's on Besu and somebody's running a SQL node somewhere. We really want to be able to make sure that all these can connect together and communicate atomically. What we mean by atomically there is that every concern in DAML has those who are authorizing the concern or signing off on the concern. So those are basically become these small intermediaries that can basically atomically say, like, if I'm moving this, say, land contract from this Fabric instance to this other Sawtooth instance over here, somebody who's responsible for actually overseeing and keeping those records is the one that's going to be able to make sure that that operation is atomic and doesn't end up in, both this Fabric ledger over here and the Sawtooth ledger have the same data when they shouldn't. So that's what we mean by that. Depending on your definition of atomic, that may or may not be the atomic in the traditional sense, but we're essentially basically just explicitly stating that when somebody has a concern with DAML, they're able to represent it and able to implement it in a way that if they're being good citizens, there's not going to be any issues. And that's really what this is about, because we're building regular everyday applications here. And let's see, I have another question here. Pohat, I apologize if I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You said that DAML delivers the highest level of security without writing additional code. How? I'll get into that in a little bit, but essentially, or actually it might be, oh no, it's in another slide or two. DAML delivers security without writing additional code because DAML is explicit about who can do what when. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but it really, DAML implements these permissions kind of in the same way that Unix or Linux might implement read, write, and execute permissions. And do we have any plan to integrate DAML with Ethereum and Solidity? Not Solidity itself. There is a DAML on Besu implementation, though. I believe Blockchain Technology Partners might have written that. I apologize if I've gotten that wrong. But essentially, that one is a way to DAML's runtime. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but over where we say DAML runtime, what the DAML runtime does is it controls the execution of code, and then the ledger that DAML is running on top of, that this runtime/driver is running alongside of, it commits data to it and uses it for the data persistence and for consensus. So there's no actual logic executing. When I say a DAML on Fabric application, there's no actual logic that's executing on Fabric other than to store and retrieve data, and then Fabric is going ahead and keeping consensus. And so the way DAML applications work and talk to each other is you connect them to your node, and you'll see a real-life example of that soon. And then once you've connected it to your node, that's what manages all the logic and getting data back and forth. Clive is asking, have any projects used DAML for blockchain integration to allow users to securely integrate different blockchains? That actually kind of goes back to Canton. So on Canton, that is possible to basically allow different blockchains to talk to each other. And yeah, so getting back to DAML, we can think about it in several different ways. So if you're a developer, you can think about DAML as a consistent language for distributed and even relational databases. If you're a project or product manager or even a developer, you can think about it as kind of reducing complexity when developing these distributed applications. And if you're anybody or you're a decision maker and running your business, you can think of DAML as basically resulting in just faster, more accurate development, particularly of distributed applications. And yes, you're very welcome for the answers. So let's take a look at some DAML code. When I talk about DAML being very explicit, here's basically what I mean. DAML has signatories and observers. You can think of them kind of as parties to a contract. Signatories are people who may be placing their signature down on the contract, and they need to sign off on it in order for the contract to exist, as opposed to other languages where people could have obligations made for them and they don't even know that they're a party to the obligation just because a database somewhere says that they are. And then we have observers, which are basically people who have been granted read permission to actually go and read the contract. So that they're kind of, you have your write permission in signatories and you have your read permission in observers, to think about it in the Unix/Linux way as well. And then for every contract you do with DAML, there's also a bunch of choices that people can make. The contract we're looking at right now is basically an IOU contract for owing somebody a beer, which back in around 2012 was actually one of the first ways that people tried to expand on blockchain. So I felt like it was a fun little example. But here, when we have choices, what we're saying is these are the things people can do with this contract after it's created. So if I were to make a beer proposal to somebody, to say, if I were to say, oh, Chris, I want to owe you a beer, I can't immediately say, hey, Chris, I owe you this beer. Chris needs to give his permission and his consent first. So what I would say is, Chris, here's a proposal that I owe you a beer, and Chris could go ahead and say, accept the beer, or could reject it. Or I, as the person who is offering it, over here as the controller, I could cancel it. And then if Chris accepted it, we would go ahead and create this new beer contract over here. And this would basically represent the obligations that we have with each other, where now what we can say is, in the signatory line, both me, the giver, and Chris, the recipient, have kind of signed off on it and said that this is okay, that I owe Chris this beer. And then eventually, when I gave Chris the beer, Chris has the option to mark it as received. And that's a very brief, high-level overview of the DAML language, but there's a lot of very neat things you get out of this. And one thing you might notice too is that this is all business logic. This is all who can do what when, who can read this contract, who can sign off on it, and no concerns about what the database looks like. Where the database actually comes in and where DAML handles all this for you is in these with declarations under our templates here that get instantiated as contracts. For the more technical amongst the audience, you can kind of think of this as having a table in a SQL database and then having rows. So you might have a column here of beer IOUs, and then the rows would include the beer information. And DAML would basically make sense of this for whatever database it was committing data to. And if you were to move from your SQL database to a Fabric database or a Fabric ledger, you wouldn't have to change anything about the code because DAML would just make sense of it. And this code goes ahead and powers regular old front ends that are obviously far, far more verbose and require a lot more code than it does on the back end. And I think that's a really powerful contrast of showing DAML, is that the backends can be relatively very low code compared to the rest of the application. Unfortunately, DAML doesn't have anything to write front ends, not yet at least. And we probably won't ever. But yeah, so now I kind of want to run you through toy production app. And that's kind of for the code that I showed you here. And this is OBeer. As we can see, you can log in as a user, and then you can manage those beers being offered and owed as IOUs, as kind of contract. And I'm actually going to deploy this in a moment, but we have a couple more questions. I think it's a real-time enterprise application development tool, much applicable for Hyperledger projects. Is it so? Yes, it's definitely a tool for developing enterprise applications and deploying them on a variety of Hyperledger's projects. And are there any DAML React/React Native templates? I'm still learning. Yes, there are. I'll actually show off that too. What DAML does is, well, we have Node.js bindings, and then we have kind of a code gen that basically takes our templates, like our template over here, and makes sense of it, and then goes and produces libraries to interact with those templates over the JSON API. And you don't have to write any code there. And I can actually show that as well. So first, actually, that's a good segue. So let's actually hop over and look at my code really quick. So here's the code we saw before. And one of the things, like Kenneth asked over here, is that, you know, I want to be able to use React with this. And really, you can use any sort of JavaScript. I actually wrote this in Vue because I don't know React very well. But what the CodeGen does is it allows us to basically go ahead and import all of our templates as classes that we can then go ahead and use in our JavaScript. So right here, since we're importing obeer, that was automatically generated from our code over here, I can come down and like right here, when I'm querying the ledger and asking for all the beer proposals or beers owed to people, all I have to do is send a query and then use this object here that can basically say, you know, this is the thing that I want to get. And let's see, we have another question here. Can we use library and modules inside DAML? How can we develop and publish our library? Yes, you can use libraries and modules inside of DAML. Basically, you can declare them over in your daml.yaml file. I won't go into that too much, but you can basically declare your dependencies here for other things you want to depend on. That's all on our docs over at docs.daml.com. And if you also wanted to expose some modules and basically produce a module to use in others, you could go ahead and expose them and expose modules. And again, all that information is on docs.daml.com. And yeah, so that's a great question. And is there a Java SDK as well? Yes, there is a Java SDK. I won't be showing that off today because I personally am not a Java programmer, but over in the Ledger API, I believe, we have our Java SDK that you can refer to, and a variety of references for basically every single command you can execute against it. So there are SDKs for both Java and JavaScript. And yeah, so that's that. These are great questions, so feel free to keep them coming. And let's see, where was I? Okay, so here we have our code, and then I've made my app, and now we want to deploy it. So I'm going to skip one or two steps here, and the only steps I'm skipping are actually downloading Fabric, because that would take a few minutes. So I just want to save that time here. But what we're going to do is we're going to deploy our app to a local DAML on Fabric instance. So I'll head over to DAML on Fabric, check out the README, and yep, I've gone ahead and already cloned it. And now it says in order to run a local Hyperledger Fabric network, which comes with it, you can obviously connect your DAML runtime to your own Fabric network if you want, if you have one deployed somewhere or you have another test one. But for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to use the one that comes with the DAML on Fabric distribution. Trying it out Sawtooth earlier, so let me go over to Fabric. And then the first step is to head into this directory and run gen.sh, which is just a little shell script that's going to generate our config files for us, and then restart Fabric that will start up our Fabric instance, and also take down an old one if it was there. This is really just designed for streamlined development. So I'm going to change over to this directory, run gen.sh, and go ahead and also restart fabric.sh. And so this is going to start up a Fabric instance that will then connect to. And so let's see, next step is deploying a DAML application to Fabric. So I'm going to hop over to the deployment guide. This deployment guide is actually written so that you can go from our create DAML app, which is a different example application, all the way up until deployment and kind of outline that full thing for you. The other option for this is actually if you were to go to daml.com/learn, we actually have an online tutorial there too, which is almost exactly the same as our deployment guide, except you can run it in your web browser. So you can go to and deploying DAML on production ledgers and go ahead and start the DAML on Fabric one. And this would actually go ahead and allow you to execute all these things inside of your browser and do it that way. But I'm not going to do that today. That's just for you to know that you can check it out. There'll be a link at the end to also when I give away the Hyperledger NYC code for the certification. It'll be on that last page as well. But anyway, back to actually deploying it locally is what we're going to do now is, okay, we've cloned DAML on Fabric and start up the local Fabric network. So now we're going to go ahead and run this command. And what this command will do with SBT here is it's going to start up our DAML driver. And that's basically the layer where once we get this started up, now our DAML application, this is where we'll deploy our DAML application, and it will know how to talk to our Fabric instance. So this is going to take a minute or two, but basically what you're going to see here is it's going to get itself set up. It'll eventually start committing some blocks and retrieving some data from the Fabric instance, as you can see going on right now. And that'll be done in a minute or so. So while that gets set up, though, let's actually start building our application. So the application I'm going to be building today is my OBeer application. So I'll head over to this, to my project here. And let's see, we have another question. DAML is compatible with which version of Hyperledger Fabric? Can we use version 1.4? Yes, I believe you can use 1.4. We've actually upgraded it to 2.2, but I think 1.4 should still work. That's also a great question for the forums. So actually, let me go ahead and test that right now. Just because I do not know if it still does, but I believe it probably should. And somebody who is much more knowledgeable on the subject than I will answer. But anyway, over here, we're going to go ahead and DAML build, which is going to build our application, and it's going to turn it into what we call a DAR file. A DAR file is very similar to a jar file in that it is a self-contained zip file that stores all the compiled binaries that we need and all the other information that we need in order to deploy our application somewhere. And then we're going to run our code gen because that's going to allow our application on the front end side to talk over the JSON API, which is going to talk to the DAML drivers, which will talk to Fabric and commit data and all that fun stuff. And we have a couple more questions here. Is the library portable and updatable between multiple servers? Yes, absolutely. There's quite a wealth of information on our forum, and I believe even in the docs on how to port and update applications. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend just going to check out the link that Francesco shared and searching. Yeah. So anyway, that generates all of our fun little code for interacting with the DAML application. And now we're going to go ahead and check and see if our DAML driver is up. And it is over here. So we can see that we're listening on port 6865, and that's basically where we're going to go ahead and deploy our application. And you're both very, very welcome for your answers to your questions. And keep them coming. These are some of the best questions I've ever received. And so, yeah, let's see. Over here now, we're going to go ahead and deploy our application to our Fabric ledger. So we're going to run DAML deploy. That's going to, it'll actually rebuild the DAR file just because it's nice about that. And it'll set up some test parties that we can actually use right here and deploys everything to the ledger. So what you can see here is that during that deployment, our DAML driver actually went and started writing a bunch of data to our Fabric chain, and our Fabric chain started receiving it and confirming that it was all written correctly. And yeah, so now we've got that started up. We can go ahead and start our JSON API, which is what our front end will talk to. And it'll just take a moment. And the nice thing here too is that the DAML JSON API, when you're writing DAML applications, it generates everything you need for yourself. There's basically a few endpoints that you'll need to learn about, and then all your interactions with your DAML application, no matter what it is, are through those endpoints. So you get an API for free. And I think that's really, really crazy that we now have, this hasn't only done our backend storage and our JavaScript libraries that we need to interact with it, but it's also done our JSON API for us. So that's pretty great. Did I understand correctly that the DAR file contains generated chain code based on the definitions? What language is the chain code in? That's a great question. So the DAR file does contain generated code, but it is not chain code in the Fabric sense. The only chain code that is actually involved here is the chain code that our DAML driver is using to talk to the Fabric ledger, to write data to it, and then to retrieve data from it. All the actual execution of our logic goes here through our DAML driver. So for example, if we had two nodes and I ran one and Jan ran one, essentially what would happen here is that we would both go ahead and connect our DAML drivers to our respective Fabric nodes, and the Fabric nodes would keep consensus and share the data they needed to with each other, not share any data they weren't supposed to, but only the data that they needed to for Jan and I to interact. And then the actual execution would happen in our DAML driver. So on the DAML driver speaks a language called DAML-LF, which is basically an intermediary language that DAML compiles down to when we run our DAML build command that we ran over here. And then that gets uploaded and starts executing on the DAML driver over here, which again is doing the actual execution and then committing all the data it needs to and reading all the data it needs to from our respective Fabric nodes. So the one thing to keep in mind here is that if you have an existing Fabric node, you can obviously connect the DAML drivers to it, but things that weren't produced by the DAML driver, it's not going to have any knowledge of. So that is something to keep in mind, is that we're not transpiling down to chain code, but we're actually going to an intermediary language and then using our Fabric node for data persistence and consensus here, which it happens to be very, very good at. So it's great. And yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Oh, one more question. Can I write Go or Java chain code that interacts with the objects defined in DAML? No, not reliably. So you can basically think of them as kind of opaque blobs. Yeah, I don't think that that'll ever change. There are people, or that there have been some people, you can try to back engineer it, but the blob is never guaranteed to remain stable, so it may just change in a future version. And the other way, though, to interact on a lower level, like you might want to do, is we are presently working on a tool to actually extract data out of a chain to go ahead and read it, so that if you needed to interact with it in a different way, you still could. But that's just not quite there yet in terms of being stable and production ready. And do we have any benchmarks that compares implementations without DAML and TPS? We are actually working on those as well, so we don't have them yet, but that's something we'll definitely post about once we have them. Yeah, I wish I could give you a better answer now, and that is also something that's on our roadmap. Is our team is very much focused on getting the throughput on DAML as absolutely high as possible. And also that's been discussed a bit on the forums as well. Let's see, Angela has a question here. Does DAML support its own unit tests, or does the programmer have to resort to writing tests? DAML supports its own unit tests written in native DAML. So actually, we now have, this is a slightly older application. We now actually have a language called script, which is very, very similar to this, but you can see here that I actually have some tests where I'm testing my code because here, for example, Karis has helped Alice out of a bind and Alice owes Carol a beer. But, you know, I have some colorful comments here, but essentially, yes, we can test in something called DAML script. And that's also on our docs over here. DAML script and building applications. And that's basically the way to not only test your application, but also to manage deployment. We also have something else related to that called triggers that basically respond to state changes on a DAML ledger and do other things. So if, you know, if a contract is created, then go ahead and do this other thing is what DAML triggers accomplish. But yeah, between script and triggers, that gets you everything you need. And you are very welcome for the answer, Angela. And Jan has another question. Just thinking about the implications of adopting DAML in a project. This means I have to be able to express all business logic in DAML and I make a commitment to only using DAML, right? Yes, that's correct. You would be only using DAML, but and then the benefit you get from that is that you get flexibility in all these other things. But DAML itself, yeah, you would have to use that in order to use it in a project. Welcome. All right. So loving all these questions. They are absolutely great. Anyway, now that we've got our JSON API started up, what we're going to do is start our front end. Here, these instructions are actually written for a React app. And like I said before, I don't know React very well, so I wrote it in Vue.js. Obviously, normally you do yarn install first to download all your libraries. But I've already done that just so it's a little more streamlined. And now I'm going to go ahead and run yarn serve, which also is going to obviously include all this code that was generated off of my DAML models as well, so that interacting with them is easy. And then open my OBR application, and then we'll log in. So these are just some test users. I'm actually going to refine this application a bit to do an actual login and authentication workflow in the future. We actually have a very exciting update coming out next month where authentication middleware is going to be added to DAML, which I am super excited about because it means that we can have much, much easier OAuth integrations and all that fun web login stuff. So if you're at all interested in keeping up on that, not to segue too much, but I would say go to daml.com, scroll to the bottom and sign up to our DAML community updates and just hit subscribe. And then when that comes out, that'll be in our DAML Developer Monthly newsletter where we basically every month, we email you when the new SDKs come out because they come out on a rolling 1-month schedule. And also basically all the highlights in those SDKs and everything that's going on in the community, any articles that have been written about DAML, any new things and fun developments, everything on the forum, that all ends up in there. So if you want to just keep up to date, daml.com, scroll to the bottom and sign up to the community updates. And yeah, so now Alice is going to offer Bob a beer. And what you can see there is that this has actually happened, and I'll prove it. We'll come over here, and we'll see that at 12:43 and 50 seconds, which is very close, we actually had Alice submitted some data over the JSON API gateway, and then we wrote that to Fabric, and then Fabric went ahead and received that data very shortly thereafter. And yeah, so then we can go ahead. And actually, you know what? Alice is going to offer one to Carol as well. And then we can go ahead, because this will show off the privacy too. We can go ahead and log in as Bob. And Bob's going to actually go, and what the application did on the back end is it just went and actually asked for all the beer proposals, not just Bob's. Bob tried to ask for everybody's. And that was a nice way that, like, it was very simple for me to write my application that way, but it was also very secure. Because what Bob did here is he executed this line of code in the front end that said, give me every beer proposal. Like, I didn't restrict my query to only those relevant to Bob. So he tried to get Carol's and everybody else's, but because of the private nature of DAML and the guarantees it provides, that didn't happen. And so Bob can see and go ahead and say, yeah, Bob, I want that, and then can go ahead and mark it as received when it's been received. And then Carol can go ahead and do the same, or Carol can say, no, I don't want the offer, and gets that full consent type of approach to it. And yeah, so that's basically DAML in a nutshell. There's quite a lot to learn about it. You can go ahead and visit bit.ly/try-DAML, which I'll actually paste the link here as well. And that'll have all the various links where you can go ahead and learn stuff. Just to kind of go over them again, is you have daml.com/learn, where you can try out a bunch of interactive tutorials in your browser. You can learn some fundamental concepts. You can check out how DAML scripts work, like Angela had asked about earlier. There's a whole bunch here. And then we have our full-on docs, where when you're actually, if you decided to use DAML in a project and you want to really get to know it, you can go ahead and check out an introduction to DAML under the Writing DAML section. And this basically breaks down everything you need to know to write your DAML application. And then, of course, if there is a question that comes up, you can head over to the forums, which is discuss.daml.com, and go ahead, ask your question, read about news, read some other tutorials and guides that haven't made their ways into the docs yet. We're really very happy to answer questions, and they generally get answered pretty quickly. And let's see, Jayakar, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Is there something that handles an API registry? If so, is that registry exportable to another application? So the API that's generated for your DAML application, if I'm understanding the question correctly, and let me know if I'm not, but is essentially this API. So you have a variety of things you can do with your contracts. You can go ahead and create new ones from templates through one endpoint. You can exercise them, exercise choices on them, like I showed over here. These choices get exercised, and that's through another endpoint. And basically what you're doing is you're contacting those endpoints saying, I want to make this contract with these arguments, and I'm executing it as this user, assuming you have, the proper credentials to actually do something as that user. So the API registry, as far as between, or the API as far as between DAML applications, is very, very similar. Where it differs are on the arguments you're sending to those endpoints, because you're essentially sending different commands, but dealing with the same endpoints. And as far as though non-DAML applications, no, you wouldn't be able to use this with that, because DAML is not made for that. So hopefully I've answered that right, but if I haven't, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to clarify. And let's see, what else was I showing off? So yeah, we have discuss.daml.com. I love the forum. I hope people use it. And then we also have, oh, you're very welcome. Then we also have certification. Oh, like I mentioned, and I should leave this up for a second, the first 10 people to use this code, HLNYC, can get 10% off the DAML Associate certification. So that's basically the first one in our suite. Basically, if you've started to write a few DAML applications and you then want to go ahead and test out your knowledge, or maybe prove to somebody, maybe even an employer, that you understand DAML at least the entry level, you can go ahead and get our DAML Associate exam for free. And I'll just leave that up. That's HLNYC. It's limited to the first 10. So if you're at all interested, I would say go ahead and snag it now rather than later. Let's see. Clive has a question regarding Haskell/DAML. Are there any academic papers for understanding language-based security and modularity. I don't know on that specific topic, but we do have Andreas Lockbiller. Here we go. Somewhere over here, he's definitely written topics on that. He's written actually quite a few papers on a variety of things in DAML. I think they're shared somewhere on the forum. I'm not finding them at this very moment, but that's a great question. I'll make sure to actually ping him about that. And it's also something you could potentially ask on the forum too, because we do have quite a few people who work on the DAML language who are very, very much into the academic implications of DAML. So I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have more people to talk to about that. But yeah, you're very welcome. And yeah, so that's my presentation. Obviously, if you have other questions, keep them coming. I'm just going to try to take a note of who the first 5 questions were from. This way I can make sure that everybody gets the t-shirts that I'm sure everybody's very excited about. But yeah, if you have any other questions, always feel free to hop by the forum, or you could also just ping me directly at anthony.lusardi@digitalasset.com. Don't ping me directly with all the technical questions, because sometimes I may not know. That's definitely for the forum. But if you have anything else, or you want to talk about this more, just feel free to reach out. You can also reach me on the forum there. I'm just Anthony. And yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Anthony. That was fantastic. And thank you to everyone for submitting those questions. I think we answered a lot. And again, please feel free to reach out to Anthony with any other questions you may have. And we're looking forward to having another meetup again next month. And again, please feel free to volunteer if you'd like to present on anything at a future meetup, and I'd be more than happy to accommodate. But thank you again to you, Anthony, and the rest of the digital asset team. And we look forward to seeing the new developments to come with DAML soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody for letting me present. Very, 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 it was a great time. I'm really amazed at all the great questions that everybody asked. So yeah, it was awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.